So you are trying to introduce a new habit or simply maintain your existing ones, but you are losing track of what you are doing and whether you are making progress. A key success factor in habit formation and achievement is to have a system to monitor your progress. Why? Because when we see progress and achievement, it motivates us to achieve more. But barriers exist that prevent us from establishing good systems. We forget the act of monitoring or recording progress is a habit in itself. And while we're not short of systems for habit tracking, many are quite complicated, require high data input, and we spend more time working on the system than we do the habit itself. Hey friends, and welcome back. Today I'm going to introduce you to a super simple, low cost, high reward system for tracking and managing your habits. It will help you answer questions in terms of, have I met the appropriate standard for the habit that I'm trying to achieve? And am I doing the habit frequently enough in order to make progress? So let's get into things. The first step is to make sure our habits that we want to introduce are well defined. They're specific, they're measurable, so ultimately we know whether we've achieved them or not when we undertake activity. Some examples from my life would be reading a chapter from the Bible each day, or sleeping for 7 hours and scoring a sleep score of 83 or more on my Fitbit. Another one would be exercising and doing Pilates for 15 minutes and then 25 minutes on the strider, making sure I've gone more than 5 kilometers. So those are some examples. Now if you need some help on this, there's another video coming up here that I've produced that will help you define and really get your habits as specific as you need. In the description below there's also a link to a checklist or guide that I've produced to help you form and get your habits well defined and ready for tracking. So give those a go and we'll move on to step 2. So the second step is to record regularly. And as I mentioned in the introduction to this video, this is where so many things fall down. We have systems that are far too complicated for what we need. We just need to make sure that we are recording our habits as regularly as possible in order for us to see whether we're making progress or not. So let's take a look at my system, and I'm going to sort of walk you through it and show you how simple it can be. So I open up to a fresh page and I put the week number at the top. I tend to do that each week throughout the year, just to have week numbers. So let's just assume week 1. I tend to put a question down for myself just to frame and refocus on what this is all about, and I want to know how I'm doing. How am I doing on my habits? I then across the top put the habits that I'm looking to track. So in this example I'm putting the ones that I talked about in the first step in terms of my Bible reading, my sleeping and my exercise. And I also have a notes column at the end in order to note down anything that happens that is out of the usual in that week. So for example, if I'm ill or perhaps I'm away on work business, then maybe my habits aren't going to be achievable on that day. So I want to note that to get a true record of how things are going. I then now note down the days of the week down the side, and then each day I simply add a tick or a cross in terms of whether I have achieved a habit or not. And it is basically a yes or a no. There's no in between. I either met the standard or I haven't met the standard. And as you can see in my example here, on Tuesday I didn't meet the standard, and the reason being was I was ill on that day. So when I consider that in the next step, the review and the summary, I might take that into consideration. So it's important to note down what has actually happened in that week. So there you have it. That is, if you like, the first part of step 2 in this case, which is noting down everything that I have done in the week in terms of whether I've achieved a habit or not. So there's the first part of my system. And alongside this, the key is to remember to record regularly. Now, in order to do that, what we've learned from habits is that you need to have a good cue, something that prompts you to regularly record. So for myself, I do this alongside my journaling. So every morning I journal, and at that stage I just record what's happened in the previous day in terms of my habits. So it's important that you think about what's going to prompt you to record regularly alongside the practical recording that I've shown you in my journal. So I hope that makes sense, and we're going to move on to step 3. So step 3 involves reviewing and refining. So you've recorded and noted all your habits down, you've tracked them all, so what next? Well, it's important to review so you can assess the progress you're making and see whether you need to make any refinements. And what's important here is that we're not after perfection. What we're after is progress and momentum. So let's take a look back at my system and I can show you this next stage. So we've recorded regularly throughout the week. It's now time to summarise. And essentially what you do is just add up the different columns and note down the number of times that you've successfully achieved your habit to the standard that you've set. And you just do that for each of your habits. Now for me, I have like this underlying standard where I say to myself, 4 out of 7 days in the week, or around about 65%, something like that. If I achieve over that standard in the week, then it's been a good week. I feel that I've created some momentum and I've made progress. And that also considers that within the week I kind of give myself one day out, like a Sabbath day, where I don't necessarily expect myself to do anything. It's like my rest day. So as you can see from this week, it's been a good week. I've achieved my habits to a good standard and I feel that I'm making momentum and progress. Now let's say that I didn't achieve my habit standard for the week, and maybe I got a 3 out of 7 for my exercise. Well, I would simply make that then the focus for the following week. I would accept where I was at this week and think, right, I'm going to focus on exercise for next week and make that the priority above all my habits to try and get that back to the standard that I'm looking for. So that's the weekly review. I then have another review cycle which I call the termly review. And the purpose of that is really to look at how you're performing in terms of your habits over a longer period of time and over a certain period. So I do this over 13 to 14 weeks. You might want to do it monthly, you might want to do it quarterly. It depends. I suppose if you're at the start of trying to implement habits, you might review more over a short period of time, maybe a few weeks, to see how you're progressing. But over time, once the habits are embedded, it's good to, I suppose, at least have a termly review. So how do I do that? Well, I basically note down sort of the number of weeks that I'm looking at over this period. I note down the same sort of habit headers in terms of my Bible one, my sleep and my exercise. And then I go back and look at all the weekly reviews that I've done. I begin to transfer some information into this termly review. And all I'm doing is simply going back to the weekly review and looking at the individual columns. So let's take the sleep column as an example. And what I'm doing is noting down when I've achieved the standard of above 4 occurrences in that week. So as you can see, I'm making a bit of a tally chart to outline how many times I've achieved that occurrence over this 13 or 14 week period. And I'll keep the information as simple as that. You could go a bit more detailed, but again, as I mentioned earlier, what we're interested in here is progress and momentum. Am I building momentum? Am I making progress? Is the frequency of how I'm doing this each week over a period of time increasing? Am I heading in, if you like, if I've got the right trajectory that I'm heading to? So I do this through my journal, looking back at the 13 or 14 weeks that I've recorded, and then I see where I get to. So once I've gone through each week and summarised it, I then add up the columns, add up the tallies to see how many times I've achieved my standard over those 13 weeks. This is the example for 13 weeks. As you can see, it's 10 for Bible, 7 for sleep, and 8 for exercise. And then similar to the weekly review, I see, well, how many occurrences overall are above my 65% level. So is Bible, sleep and exercise, have I, on 65% of the weeks, have I achieved the standard that I wanted to? And as you see, I'm just working that out at the moment. And as you can see, I've done well in terms of my Bible reading, but my sleep and exercise fall below that, if you like, 65% standard. So what does this mean? Well, simply it means I know where to focus my energies and priorities for the next 13 or 14 week period. I need to really focus on my sleep and my exercise, and it's not that I don't focus so much on the Bible, but actually I've achieved well, I've done well reading my Bible in this period. What I need to do in the period that follows is focus on sleep and exercise. And the process is as simple as that. You just keep repeating this process again and again, and what you'll see is you'll gain momentum, you'll see that you'll make progress, but it won't feel like a heavy burden, and the system that here doesn't overwhelm you because you're not feeding with so much information that the system just takes forever to keep in place and keep going. So I hope that has been helpful for you. So a super simple system for habit tracking involves firstly defining your habits well, making sure they're specific, making sure they're measurable, making sure you know whether you've achieved them or not. The second step is to record regularly, using a system similar to mine maybe, where you're just noting down when you've achieved your habit. And the key here is making sure you have the right cue that prompts you to remind you to record regularly. So try and tie that in with maybe an existing habit that you do daily. And thirdly, you then need to review and you need to refine. And this is all about progress and momentum. So if you're achieving your habits maybe 65% of the time or higher, then you should be building some momentum, you should be making some progress. And all you need to do alongside this is have a pen and paper to help facilitate and record the process. So on to my one last thing or bonus tip for you today, and it is simply this. Don't try and increase the standard of your habits, introduce new habits, or change the system until you see that you're making regular progress and building momentum on those, if you like, foundation habits that you're trying to introduce first. You need to be achieving maybe a level of 75% in terms of regularity and performance before you can even think about introducing any more changes into that. If you try and do it too quickly, your existing habits and approach to things will just break down and it will lead to frustration. So I hope that's helpful. So that's it for today. If you found this video helpful, why not take a look at these two videos? Subscribe to get the latest content, and remember, be fruitful, and I'll see you in the next video.